Hi everyone, welcome back. It's my Swedish Whiskey Girl, and today I'm very excited to share a little interview with you guys. I'm interviewing Bryan, who is the brand ambassador in Canada for Glenmorangie Ardbeg. It was such an interesting conversation. I was planning to keep it under 30 minutes, but we just kept talking. And it's just more and more that I wanted to find out. And Bryan was such a lovely person to chat to as well. Very passionate about whiskey. And if you're curious about wee Beastie and the new Glenmorangie Tailor Cake, make sure you listen on because he's going to talk a little bit more about that and the process of how it kind of came about. So yeah, I hope you'll enjoy it. I really enjoyed filming it. I always get so nervous before filming interviews, but yeah, it's just very relaxed and a great chat with Bryan. So I hope you'll enjoy it.
Of course. Well, I thought we'd just kick off with if you want to tell us about who you are and how you ended up in Canada. Because you're not from Canada and you're based in Toronto, I think.
Yeah. So I live in Toronto, in Ontario, Canada, and I'm originally from Lanarkshire, just outside Glasgow. Now I can kind of say Lanarkshire to yourself a lot, of course, because you know where it is. Not really many people in Canada do. And I moved to Canada initially 10 years ago, and I've been back and forth between Canada and Scotland for a long time. But it's certainly a country that I really fell in love with when I came here on holiday 11 years ago. And I never moved to a different country before. And I thought, why not? You take the opportunity. I'm pretty sure you can say the same. And yeah, since then I've always had this idea that Canada's where I want to live. I'm very proud to call myself a permanent resident of Canada now, and also as well I'm married to a Canadian, an amazing woman called Jen.
Oh, nice. That is amazing. I always thought that Canada looks such a dream. So I have to go at some point, hopefully, if the world opens up again. And I thought I would include as well, we've never actually met, right? We've been in the same building, I think. Or you've been in the same building as Cody, at least.
Yeah. So last year we were over with the Glenmorangie Ardbeg education team, which was great. It was a fantastic trip, and we had people from all over the world who get to represent our two amazing distilleries. And it was the first time, since I've joined the team. I've only been with the team about 2.5 years. And when I got over there, I got to meet these amazing people who are so passionate about Scotch whisky and from different parts of the world. And we actually got to go in the let me say it right. There's a restaurant there in Edinburgh, and it's connected to the Experience.
Yeah,
which I
I know
forget
the
the name of it.
restaurant. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I think Cody was there at the same time, but we never got a chance to say hello to each other.
Maybe
And
next time.
yeah, and correct, me and you have never met, but it does feel as if because we chat quite a lot, obviously.
Yeah, which is one
Yeah,
of the good things I think of the last few months that you've gotten to meet people online.
yeah, for sure. No, it's
Yeah.
one of the bonuses.
And of course, you work for Glenmorangie and Ardbeg, two quite well-known Scotch whisky brands. What is it you do for them, and your title, perhaps?
Yeah, so I'm the brand ambassador for Canada for Glenmorangie and Ardbeg. I also work a little bit with a tequila brand we have here, tequila distillery called Volcan de Mia Tierra, and I do a little bit more on the education side of that. But when it comes to Glenmorangie and Ardbeg, it's a brand ambassador role, and it's a dream job. I don't think I have to say that. I think a lot of people there are going to be really jealous of me. I will say something though that a lot of people say they want my job. I need this. This is what I'm good at. Is talking about this.
I mean, I know I'm jealous. I know a lot of people already know this, but Ardbeg 10 was also actually the whiskey that got me into whiskey. The first one I
Really?
actually liked. Yeah.
Wow.
And
And
Glenmorangie is my dad's favorite. So both brands are close to my heart.
was it the Glenmorangie Cellar 13? Was one of your favourites?
Yes, definitely. It has a bit of an emotional connection to me. So it's definitely a special one.
Yeah. The good thing about Glenmorangie is that it's such a backlog of all these amazing whiskies, but the issue is you have to go in the secondary market nowadays to go and get them. But
Yeah, of course.
they're worth it. Some of them certainly. Like I myself, I've got my mum and dad still living in Lanarkshire, and I've used their small flat as a storage depot for my whiskies that I order on Scotch whisky auctions.
Yeah, that's brilliant. No, I know when I got appendicitis the first time I went up to Speyside, Cody got me a gift. That's a kind of get better gift, and that was the Glenmorangie Milshin as well. So I have a lot of them at home, which is nice. But I was thinking we should talk a little bit more about the brands. But before that, I thought it would be fun to get to know you a bit better. So we can start with if you might have a favorite whiskey expression or a style of whiskey that you prefer. I know a lot of people, of course, tend to have favorite whiskies depending on the season and on their mood. But if you had to say one right here, right now.
Yeah, it's so interesting though, because usually at this time of year in Canada, it's usually starting to get cold. So usually, if you've seen Canada when it comes to a winter in Canada, that's not an exaggeration. Like sometimes here in Toronto, like you're getting nothing but snow for a few months, and it's gorgeous. Today it's roasting hot and 18 degrees. I don't know what's going on. So usually this is where I start to go into when it gets a bit colder. One of my favourite whiskies from our range is Glenmorangie Ardbeg, and this is sherry cask expression, sherry finished expression. And that to me is like that's when I'm ready for winter to get myself ready. Today it's absolutely scorching hot, and what I usually do like though when it's warm, I actually love Ardbeg, like, and it's having peaty whiskey when it's warm, and especially we're very lucky to have this little balcony that's outside here. Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. And as much as in my head I always thought that smoky whiskey was maybe something you'd have when it's a little bit colder, I think the opposite. I think it's absolutely great when it's sunshine. In terms of my expression that I would say just now that I'm going crazy for, and this is going to be coming across as the most crazy marketing thing, but it is the new Ardbeg wee Beastie. I have kind of totally fallen in love with it. My favourite Ardbeg before that would be Ugadal, which I think anyone that knows me would hear me rave about Ardbeg Ugadal all the time. But I have to say, the wee Beastie is probably one that I'm really enjoying at the moment.
Yeah, I mean it's fascinating one. I got to try the wee Beastie and the new black as well just a few months ago, and I mean there's always so many fascinating stories and just whiskey expressions coming out. I mean, Dr. Bill is always I'm always curious about what he's going to do next. But I was thinking as well. No, I didn't send this question through earlier, but I was going to also ask if you have a favorite Canadian whiskey since you live in Canada.
Okay. That's a great question, because unfortunately in the UK there's not a huge amount of Canadian whiskey that gets through, and Canadian whiskey itself as a category, it hasn't really had like the global appeal maybe as what Scotch whiskey or American whiskey or Japanese whiskey have. And more recently, thankfully, you're actually seeing some more in the UK. There's a few that I would say are available in the UK that I would definitely pick up. There's a fantastic rye whiskey made by Dr. Don Livermore at Wiser's, and it's called Lot 40. And that's a whiskey which I think really tells you an awful lot about Canadian whiskey. And that's one I think if I understand, you can get that at certain places in the UK. But
Yeah,
I
I
would
think
also
so.
say as well, yeah, that's one I would say there. In terms of some that it's very difficult to get, there's a couple of my favourites. My favourite distillery that I've really got to know that's opened up since I've been here, and I've got to see the evolution of it, is a distillery out in British Columbia on Vancouver Island called Shelter Point. And Shelter Point it's a whiskey you can't get unfortunately in the UK or in Europe. It's very small batch. By the real word, not that kind of marketing word, small batch. I mean that it actually is. It's a very small distillery. It's an amazing distillery. It really is. They're doing a lot of grain to glass approach, and also as well taking on a lot of the methods that you'll use in different parts of the world, such as doing like cask finishing as well. And they've also managed to make like a peated expression. So it's really exciting. But there's so many good ones here. It's kind of hard. I hate to say Shelter Point is my favourite, but a lot of people that know me would probably know that answer coming up straight away.
That's nice to hear because I have had a few recommendations from Canadians that are just around in the whiskey world, and they have brought up both of those too. So I haven't tried that many Canadian whiskies yet, but I'm really looking forward to exploring them. And I was also going to ask because I don't know if you have a story or if it just happened naturally, but how you actually got into whiskey, or have you always loved it?
I think that coming from Lanarkshire, you would maybe expect that, yeah, I was brought up on the stuff, but that's not really the case at all. I myself, I think me and a lot of my friends have this similar story. We start to get into whiskey a little bit in your early 20s, and for me, that was the same. I always liked a dram. Always liked a dram at the pub. My Hoff and Hoff is usually my thing. Like I go into the Bon Accord or the Pot Still with Ben Nevis, and it used to usually be like a half pint of ale and a dram to go with it. But I didn't really take much notice in terms of what these whiskies were. I just know that I was enjoying them. And I think the real turning point, though, was when I was one of the people that started the Flask Hiking Club which is something that I'm incredibly proud about. I know more. I bug you all the time about it.
No, that's fine. It's great to hear that it's such a good community and everyone that's part of it. Because I saw you were featured in with the Scotch Malt Whisky Society the other day in their latest issue of Unfiltered, their online magazine, and they gave you a great shout out because you have a lot of big age differences, and there's also almost a 50-50 split, I think, of men and women.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. Not something that was necessarily on purpose. It was. I mean, the Hip Flask Hiking Club started, and there was only 6 of us in a flat in Inverness, actually. And it was just like, okay, let's just drink whiskey tonight, and then this like, and we came up with a name, which I'm really proud of. Like we've kept that name, and before you know it, like we actually realised that as we were kind of evolving and the numbers were kind of growing, that split was always kind of there, and we've never really went out to sort of like change the whiskey world or anything. But I think it does show you that I have this theory on this. There's something when people talk about how is it you convert younger drinkers into whiskey, or how do you convert this idea of like females into whiskey? I don't think it's converting. It's reaching out. And I think and just talking to people with like a lot of confidence, like you're going to enjoy this. And that's all you have to do, really. Because whiskey's fantastic. And it doesn't really matter who you are in the world. Like the fact that people enjoy whiskey in different parts of the world, there's no reason why like you can't actually do that to any of your friends, regardless of where they come from or who they are.
Yeah, definitely. No, I agree. I think it's a lot about just making it an alternative for people. Because I know a lot of people that are my friends that are young females in Sweden, for example, and friends that are not working in the whiskey industry. They would never even consider whiskey. They don't know that much about it, and they never had anyone introduce them to it. So I think that's one of the reasons that you might not see a lot of people that enjoy it that might be younger females or just younger people in general. So yeah, I definitely agree, but it's great to see. And I think as long as you give people an option, then they can just decide for themselves.
And I will say as well, like I mean, when I started my whiskey journey, it was a little bit different. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's kind of fending for yourselves. And the one thing that I have is that those amazing pubs that I went into, like you're talking to people behind the bar who are very knowledgeable, and that's a fantastic tool for someone who gets to learn about whiskey. But also as well, the community in Scotland, I think, is something that there's definitely a little bit of that here, but I probably say in Scotland, like people have arguments in the pub about what their favourite whiskey is, and it seems like a normal thing. Like we're talking about a drink here, and people actually have like full-blown arguments about what the best one is, and I love that. I think that's something that really we should really embrace a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a social way and also to connect with people. And yeah, well, speaking of these kind of lovely whiskey experiences, do you have a favorite whiskey memory or that one time you were drinking with someone special or drinking something special?
Yeah. There's been so many, and there's been a few. There's this is something that is quite personal. It's something that when I was kind of growing up, my dad just never really drank alcohol or anything like that. But when me and my wife got married, my mum and dad actually came over to Canada for it, and it's a long way, obviously. And my dad said, "Yeah, like I'll have a dram with you." I'm like, "Wow, like I've never had a dram with my dad before," and then he did it on my wedding day. And I guess for some people out there, this might be the equivalent of the kind of dream where it's like my dad never played ball with me. This is like me and my dad getting to share a dram, and it's such a really nice thing because my dad is like back in the day, he was a really massive whiskey fan. He knows an awful lot about whiskey as well. And it wasn't a case of us nosing it and tasting it and actually saying, "Oh, you're picking up all these amazing bouquets of like dried fruit and all these floral notes." No, it was just us enjoying a whiskey together. And I think there's something really in that I get really passionate about being really analytical about whiskey. And when talking to my friends, you have this idea. I know yourself, you're incredible with tasting notes. There's a lot of fun in that. But I think for me, there's something about Scotch whiskey when it's just sharing it and it's there and you know it's special.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think sharing flavors with friends and just kind of connecting over it and talking about it, or if it's just there as kind of a side little thing to your conversations, it's just a nice thing. And I think because you have such big respect for whiskey, it takes so long to make. And especially when you start to get to know people that are making it, you know that they put a lot of passion and a lot of their focus into making it, even though it's just above legal age, or if it's something that's been there for 50 years, it's still been a lot of care that's been taken into it. So yeah, definitely. That's such a nice story, sharing with your dad. I remember the first time I did that with my dad as well. It was also quite special, especially since I used to not like it at all. And he's a big fan. I'm just trying to look here so I don't miss any questions. But yeah, speaking of your family, I'm guessing you miss them a lot. And is that the thing you might miss the most about Scotland?
Well, you put me in the spot, so I have to say yes. I don't. So yeah.
Sorry. If you can't say your family, what would you say?
No, I do. I really do.
Or is it
Obviously,
original recipe Iron Brew?
oh, you know what? That's a conscientious thing because you can still get the good stuff here.
I've heard.
Yeah. So you can still get the good stuff here. But no, you know what? Friends and family, for sure. Technology is an amazing thing. Something that I very grateful of. Obviously, making friends like yourself, but also as well being able to connect with my friends and family back home. But yeah, that's definitely something. And I think even in the better times, there's always that idea of that's why you go home. I go home to see my family, and we generally don't have to do anything with each other as long as we're hanging out. That's enough. That's enough for me. I don't really need to go out and do anything extravagant with my family. Just hanging out is enough. But yeah, there's that there. I do genuinely, because I'm so passionate about I feel I'm so passionate about the Scotch whisky industry. I do kind of sometimes miss just being around that a little bit more, But I will say something. The Canadian community here in whisky for whisky as well is fantastic. So it's not as if I've got some home comforts here.
That's nice to hear. But yeah, I can definitely understand it being able to visit the distilleries and everything. Hoping you'll be able to come visit soon, perhaps, with the team. But what is the best thing about Canada then?
Yeah, there's so many. There's so many things. Canada for a start is bloody massive. there's so much to explore, and it's a bit of a tease because before when I got this job, even getting outside in Ontario is like tough. Like, to give you an idea in terms of size, Ontario itself, where Toronto is, that's 5 times. It's incredible to even think of what it's like to even travel out to, say, Nova Scotia or Vancouver out in BC.
Sorry, I think I had some technical issues. You were just about to say the comparison of size, and then it kind of cut out.
Yeah, I'll do it again because I say this. This is not something off the top of my head. This is my fact that I say. Like, a lot of people might ask me what the population of Canada is and things like that. This is the only fact I really know off the top of my head. It's that Ontario is 5 times the size of the UK.
That's a good one to kind of get into the mindset of how big it actually is.
Yeah, but it's really is lovely. You get a huge amount of variety no matter where you're going. Each of the different provinces do have their own character about them, and the one thing that sort of ties everything in, everyone's very polite for a start, or most people I should say are very polite, and you can kind of be yourself here. There's everyone's in Toronto especially. Everyone's a stranger. Like, everyone's from somewhere else, and there's always little districts in Toronto where you've got like Little India, Little Italy, the Greek town. So me and my 4 friends may make Little Scotland at one point. I don't know.
That's brilliant. Well, it certainly sounds like such a lovely place, and I've never really felt this kind of urge to go to America, but Canada's always been one of those places you just see the nature, and everyone says everyone's so friendly. It just sounds ideal. I really want to go one day.
Definitely have to have you over, and I would recommend actually for anyone who's coming over that there is some amazing whiskey shows here, and in terms, I don't want to again single out too many because there's so many good ones, but I'd probably say 2 of the most famous ones would be the New Brunswick Whiskey Show, or Spirit Festival, sorry, and out in Victoria they have the Victoria Whiskey Festival as well. They're different sides of Canada. Victoria Whiskey Festival is usually in January, and I would say that if you do get the opportunity, come along for a whiskey festival. You yourself, like, and Cody as well, like, you will absolutely love the idea of feeling like you're in a different country, but you actually see the passion of people when it comes to Scotch whiskey, or whiskey in general, actually. Because a lot of these festivals are all done for charity. They're not there to be money makers. They're actually done by purely out of passion. And it's a brilliant way to see an insight in terms of how people outside of myself and the industry, people are doing this off their own back.
Yeah, no, it sounds. I have to go as soon as possible. I just want to travel now, but staying put for a while longer. But yeah, I wanted to talk about Glenmorangie Ardbeg, of course. I know a lot of people might know about them already, and I think it's great that you have such two big strong brands that one is peated, of course, and one is unpeated. And I know there's a lot of people that might think that all Scotch is smoky, but of course Glenmorangie isn't. So it must be good to represent a brand that has those two. And I just wanted to ask a bit about how, if you notice any differences with the brands from Scotland, for example, to Canada. And I know I've had some Patreon questions about how, if they're different in ABV and what the challenges are to kind of promote it in a country like Canada.
Yeah. I think the first thing you said there about the different characters of Ardbeg and Glenmorangie, in more ways than one. Like, I mean, the flavours of it, with Glenmorangie being all unpeated and Ardbeg all being very heavily peated, it makes my job extremely easy and also very exciting. I really like the idea of having a distillery characteristic. You're kind of like you're making sure that you're maintaining the distillery characteristic. You know, if Glenmorangie wanted to, they could create a heavily peated whiskey. And Ardbeg in the past had one called Blasta, which was a virtually unpeated whiskey. But in terms of now, actually keeping that distillery characteristic there, I think is really important. And it's really good to talk about because you kind of find that I've got a whiskey for everyone. So people a lot of times, I know yourself that you said Ardbeg 10 was a whiskey that really got you into whiskey. For a lot of people, they may find that Glenmorangie, especially 10 years old, that's a whiskey a lot of people kind of find that's where they get their training wheels, that's where they get to find their palate on it. And I find this is really exciting for me because I get to chat to people who may start out on one of our whiskies, and then I'll go and talk to them maybe about 6 months later, and I'll see how they're getting on. And before you know it, they're into the other side of it. So I dare say I've got one of the simplest jobs in the industry. There's not too much mixing and matching, and there might be a little bit of fake competition in the companies between the distilleries, but it's all friendly, of course.
Sorry.
When you go.
No, I was just going to say, you mentioned the Glenmorangie 10 might be a lot of people's favourites. And I know I had some questions. And of course, a massive thank you to my wonderful patrons who submitted some questions. But they wanted to know if you can notice a difference in kind of the palate or for flavour in Scotch whisky from Scotland and Canada.
So it depends on what people usually prefer.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's actually really interesting because I think that it always caught catching me off guard. Like I think for myself, when I'm talking to like the Hip Flask Hiking Club, for example, there's people there and they just like peated whiskey, and it's just like that's all I want. I just want peat. And there's other people who come to over here, and some people actually are like, "Why are you using peat? It ruins the whiskey." and there is certainly something about how people drink it as well, and maybe how people have been told via marketing, perhaps, be it. Should just be like maybe part of the culture over maybe like 20 years or so ago, where it was like what a whiskey was meant to be. And I think for a lot of it, I think that a lot of times that I hear here in Canada, a lot of people will say smooth, for example. Like a whiskey has to be smooth, or there's no burn. There's these sort of terms that sometimes do come up, and it's usually in an older demographic, I would probably say. And I think it's what a lot of people would expect a good whiskey to be, was something that was easy going. What I find now, though, a lot of younger drinkers are definitely more interested in more interesting flavours. And I'd probably say if you go to some of the real mixology hubs around Canada, so out in Halifax and Nova Scotia, it's a wonderful bartending community that's out there. And I'd probably say if you were to do like a cross section of it, they're going in for those like big, heavy peated flavours. So I think it depends. I think part of it is not necessarily just about the country to country. I think it's probably just like almost an age thing as well.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think it's something I've thought about a lot lately, because I know there can be a big difference between, for example, the Japanese palate, who are used to a very different way of eating flavors and just how everything's presented to them, and to a Western palate that might want something that's a bit bigger in its character. And a lot of people are big kind of fans of either heavily sherried styled whiskies or heavily peated. So I do think it's very interesting to see what people prefer.
I would say if there's anything, I don't know if there's one parallel. Our Glenmorangie Kinta Ribbon, or port cask finished whiskey, that one there is a massive hit here. And in terms of here in Toronto, I mean, and a lot of people absolutely say that's their favourite. Out in Quebec, however, the Nectar d'Or, which is our Sauterne cask finished whiskey, that's like the best seller out there. And I don't know, and me and our team sort of thing, like we just take a guess that maybe it's because the cask themselves are coming sourced from France. Maybe there's an emotional attachment to it because Quebec itself is partly French speaking. So we ourselves like can't really figure out exactly if it's flavor or if it's something maybe to do with the marketing or something like that.
I mean, I always have this kind of controversial opinion, that I quite admire good marketing in whiskey, because I think I love the storytelling elements, and I love when people do something fun with it, and just maybe reach out to a new audience, and just all the different things. And I know a lot of people are just focusing on the whiskey and no marketing. Marketing's the enemy. But I love a bit of marketing, and I know there's been some excellent marketing for Glenmorangie Ardbeg, of course, Tale of Cake recently, and then the wee Beastie.
Yeah,
And I did have a
look at it.
question about, yeah, they look great. I mean, I don't know who convinced Bill to do that photo shoot when he has a cake in his face, but I'm sure hopefully he had fun. But yeah, we had a question about Wee Beastie, which has been a great success. I know a lot of people are really enjoying it. If you know how the idea of it came about, and if you have any information about how the advert was made. I know if someone hasn't seen the advert, it's kind of this old style horror film. I don't know how to describe it. I'll
Yeah,
have to
it's
put a photo up somewhere.
like a B movie sort of way, like Creature from the Black Lagoon,
Yeah,
or yeah.
exactly.
So it's which I'm a big fan of, and I'm a big fan of those movies. So I had no input at all when that came up, but I got very excited when we got to see what the marketing was going to be on it. But yeah, Wee Beastie. Oh my word! Yeah, it's been I've been really really excited to get to talk about it now, because I found out about it a little while back, and when I think the first thing that got me was the age statement. Like, actually does say 5 years on it. Now, we're not saying we're the first people to do that, of course. People like Ben Romock and Glenn Grant have done that before. But certainly for ourselves to do that, I think it's quite a bold move. I'm quite happy to say that it's a bold move to do that. And the reason why we were quite confident to do it was a couple of different reasons. Number one, in 1997 or 96, 97, when Glenmorangie, as we say, kind of rescued Ardbeg, it was on its last legs and the bulldozers were at the door. And when Glenmorangie took over there, they didn't have a huge amount of stock. And the kind of dream was to create the Ardbeg 10 years old. And they had the line called the PT Path to Maturity, which was a range of whiskies at a younger age. So I don't know if you've ever tried any of these more. I've only tried one of them. But there was the first Ardbeg released in that line was called Ardbeg Very Young, and was one of the best names of a whiskey I've ever heard. And that there was that's now like a massive collector's item, and that was about 5 or 6 years old. So we had that maybe as like a little bit to go by. But the other thing as well is we also do our best to listen to the Ardbeg fans. Ardbeg itself, as some people know, it's got a little bit of a cult mentality around it. And you do get people who are just like, they absolutely love Ardbeg no matter what's coming out. And a lot of times it's not necessarily just like give us your oldest matured whiskey. It's just anything that's a little bit more different, a little bit offbeat. The Dr. Bill Lumsden was over in Germany a number of years ago, and he actually did a tasting, and he had the 6 whiskies lined up. And one of the ones, he took a cask sample, and I think it was 3 or 4 years old, and everyone went crazy for it. So Dr. Bill himself was like, okay, this is something that's new. I don't think I've ever remembered doing a tasting where I've actually brought out a young whiskey, but then he has brought out his young Ardbeg, and people went crazy for it. So it was always in the back of his head that he wanted to eventually release a whiskey which is young. Brendan McCarran, one of our other whiskey makers. So we have Dr. Bill Lumsden, Brendan McCarran, Gillian McDonald as our whiskey creation team. And Brendan McCarran, when he came on board about 7 years ago, I think now, he got an amazing day around about the warehouses at Ardbeg, and he actually tried young Ardbeg, and I think again it was like 3 or 4 years old, and he said that's absolutely fascinating. And so both of them individually had this dream of actually doing it, and then our marketing team, bold as ever, and that's something I can say. Like in terms of our marketing, we do go out there, and that's great. And they actually said, "Okay, I think now's the time," and they were delighted. So the 3 of them came up with this amazing Ardbeg 5 years old. It uses American oak and Oloroso sherry casks, and I think that when initially I got terrified, I was like, that's nice to have a 5-year-old whiskey with what if it's not very good. And but oh my word, I've totally fallen in love with it. It's like love at first nose for me. I was just like, it's absolutely stunning.
No, that's so nice to hear. Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I like that there's an age statement coming out that is so young. And of course, most people will already know, but just worth saying that an age statement just shows you what the youngest component in the bottle is. But it's often that you've had this kind of stigma around age that the older the better. But I like that Ardbeg's taking a step out and saying, no, look at us, we're doing great whiskey and it's 5 years old.
Yeah,
Definitely.
for sure. And I think also it has to be good. That's the other thing as well, is that the whiskey itself is like, I think it's nice to do that, where it's like you're coming out with something that's different. You're doing something that's maybe the first time doing it. And I think it's always good to do that. It's not to kind of like push down a wall that's already there or start a path. But it has to be good. And I think that's the one thing that I've been loving reading the reviews about it, and the feedback that I've been getting from whiskey fans here when they've tried it, away from the age statement, away from the marketing, away from everything else, it's a really, really lovely whiskey.
Yeah, of course. No, you kind of have to. And I think you get that feeling. I haven't met anyone who's making whiskey in Scotland that doesn't care about the flavour foremost. And then the marketing, of course, is just a way to invite other people to try your flavour, because a lot of people are so proud of it and they put in so much work to make sure that it is something that people enjoy. And I know it must be tricky for Ardbeg because they have their die-hard fans that will let you know if it isn't up to standard. So I think they've done a great job, definitely. And I mean, Tail Cake is also another one that is fascinating. Do you want to tell us a bit about that one as well?
Yeah. So this was into a lot about Dr. Bill Lumsden's mind. It's a strange place to be, I imagine. Dr. Bill, I've been very honoured to like go to tastings with Dr. Bill, and I've had some conversations with him. And sometimes when he talks about how to make a whiskey, like when he's actually creating these whiskies, it's not just on flavour. You know, and what I mean by that is that it's not as if he goes out and says, I'm just trying to make a sweet whiskey today, or I'm going to go out and try and make a fruity whiskey, or want on notes of X, Y, and Z. Like the Tale of Cake is a fantastic example of how it's not just that; it's about sensation as well. And it was actually based on a memory that he had. Like so, he himself, he there's different. He has a different memories of this when it comes to actually eating cake, but he knows how much he loves it. And he remembers the sensation he had when he was a kid, and he had his grandmother who would make a pineapple upside down cake, which I've never actually tried one of those. They sound delicious.
I haven't either, but so great.
Yeah. And also as well his daughter also as well, quite recently, in our time, they sort of made a cake for his birthday. And these sort of things here, though, this is where he sort of gets these inspirations from. It's kind of like, okay, well, these are things that exist, and things that give him a lot of happiness. And it's like, how can I actually have that inspiration and then have a whiskey that sort of surrounds that? And it's a long game. You know, you can't just sort of think of, all right, that's trendy. That's something that's in my head. You have to think of this way in the past. So how he wanted to get that, not necessarily just to look at a sweet whiskey, because it's not just sweet, it's quite a lot of amazing tropical notes in there as well. How do you do that? And what he went over to an experiment that he tried a number of years ago, and it was using Hungarian Tokaj casks. And I've tried Tokaj a few times in my life. I'd never heard of it until it was forced upon me, because I didn't really like the idea of having a sweet wine. And I remember trying Tokaj, and like that's not just sweet. There's a huge amount of complexity in that. And Dr. Bill loved Tokaj. He actually got casks from Hungary a number of years ago, and what had happened is that it was working. So he had the spirit in there. It was maturing perfectly fine. My understanding, I think it was from American oak, then finished in Tokaj. And after a year or so, he said, "This is going to be absolutely wonderful. Everything's working well." And I think maybe after a couple of months later, it wasn't very good. It was kind of like it was that the oak had started to dominate, because the Hungarian oak is quite intense. And it was like, and in that short time, so he had this almost like a white whale thing. Is that I want to make a Tokaj whiskey, and it's obviously based on these memories he's had. And when we actually got to hear about it, and we've seen the marketing of it, it's like this here is different. This is like something that we're really excited to try, because it's not just here is Glenmorangie that tastes sweet. This is not Glenmorangie just tastes fruity. It's actually already everyone when they look at it was already having this amazing. They're using their imagination to what it's going to be. And again, just like the wee Beastie, it has to be good. And again, really delighted to say that Tale of Cake's been a fantastic success for us.
Yeah, I really like those annual releases, because it feels like it just gives Bill a chance to, or Dr. Bill, I feel bad when I don't say Dr. Bill, but he gets this chance to be a little bit more experimental, but still letting the spirit shine through. And then he just tops it up with things that changes the experience slightly. So I think they're a great thing. And I know someone asked if Considering you had Taylor Cake, would Glenmorangie ever consider doing a Christmas whiskey? I know they do the annual ones that are released pretty much the same time every year, aren't they?
Yep. So what we used to have a range called the Private Edition. Now that was 1 to 10. It finished up on a wonderful whiskey called Glenmorangie Alta. So if anyone's not tried that or even heard of it, the Glenmorangie Alta was actually using our very own wild yeast, something that not a huge amount of people would really talk about in the industry as being a game changer. But if you ever try Glenmorangie Alta, it's a fascinating whiskey. It's nice, it's lovely, it's a great whiskey in terms of flavour wise, but it's also like if you're a bit of a whiskey nerd or whiskey geek or want to learn a little bit more about the building blocks of how whiskey is made, the Alta is a fantastic example of that. And a lot of these whiskies in the private edition were coming out, yeah, as you said, roughly the same sort of time. And the idea of that was a lot to do with this idea of a showcase to the experiments that Dr. Bill and the team were doing. This is a little different. So the private edition has wrapped up, and then the Tale of Cake is, we're not necessarily, and I won't necessarily say it's going to be another 10 whiskies we're going to do successively, but certainly we do like the idea of releasing something special each year. Now, the question there was if if we were thinking of doing a Christmas whiskey. There was actually one that came out. It wasn't necessarily Christmas themed as such, but it was a number of years ago, well before I'd worked for the company, and it was a midwinter's night dream, and it was using cask from Spain again, and if I'm right in saying, I think it was only released in certain parts of the UK, and however, when I first tried it, it was actually here in Canada, because out in Alberta there is a massive Glenmorangie fan, and he's got more Glenmorangie than Glenmorangie have, I'm sure. And he actually gave me a sample of this, and I'd never tried it before, but this is where I tried it. I tried it out in Alberta, and this person there has like 2 cases of this. I don't know how he got them, but I tried it there, and actually, again, they got it spot on. This was a whiskey that was meant to be quite Christmassy, and it does have that. A lot of those kind of like lovely sweet and spicy flavors. If you can't find it though, Sláinte is just as good.
Nice. Yeah, I saw that one as well. There's too many good ones, and then you look back in the archives and you just was like, oh, I wish I'd tried that one. I wish I'd tried that one. But I think there's going to be exciting things coming soon as well. And I wanted to ask, let me see if I can get this right, because someone was asking about if there's a difference between selling whiskey in Canada and the UK and other parts of the world. Like, does the strength of whiskey differ, how you get the bottles over to Canada, and if you distribute to the USA?
Yeah, so in terms of the challenges we have between the UK and Canada, that's one of the easiest ones to answer. Now, in the UK, it's a private market. You can go to a supermarket, you can buy a bottle of whiskey, you can go to some amazing shops like the Grail in Stirling or the Good Spirits Company to give them a bit of a shout out. I think it's amazing. It's like if you're passionate about whiskey, you can sell whiskey. Here in Canada, it's not as easy because we actually have provincial liquor boards, and some of the provinces, that's the only place you can actually buy your alcohol from. So here in Ontario, you cannot buy a whiskey outside of a provincial store. Now, that's the Liquor Control Board of Ontario. So if you come here and you're saying, let's visit all of these whiskey shops, there's only one to choose from, and it's the LCBO. Now, the LCBO are fantastic, though. They do have a great range, and there's an equivalent of that out in Quebec. It's called the SAQ, and some of the different boards around Canada, they have their own regulations. Alberta is probably the closest you're going to get to what's similar to what you get in the UK. So there's challenges there. There's challenges there because there's not the independent side of it in a lot of the provinces. So that's kind of what a lot of the industry is kind of used to. And the question there about going to the States is a wonderful place to have whiskey for certain parts of the States because they have the independent stores which are there. But again, some of those stores are also state run by the different governments which are there. So it's good and bad. What I probably say though for ourselves, that one of the things that we don't rest on it, but it's something we can rely on. Glenmorangie and Ardbeg are legacy brands. Like people actually already know of Glenmorangie and Ardbeg. Even if you're not a fan of Scotch whisky, I think there's a good chance you've probably heard of Glenmorangie and Ardbeg, and that goes a long way because when it comes to going into a store, there's a good chance that some of the store managers who might not necessarily be experts necessarily in Scotch whisky, they will trust the name, and that makes our life a little bit easier.
Yeah, definitely. And when it comes to the shipping over and the ABV, you bottle at the same ABV worldwide, don't you?
Yeah, the
Or
only difference you'll kind of see, and it's an unusual thing because it happens quite a lot in different whiskies, is in America and the States, the Glenmorangie 10 years old is 43% ABV. Um, that's the same for a lot of different distilleries, and it is something that's been historic. It's not just a new thing. It's something that has been quite historic, and it's not for every whiskey, but a lot of whiskies that are usually 40% ABV in the UK would actually be 43. In terms of the rest of our range, though, apart from that one Glenmorangie 10 in the States, everything else is exactly the same as what it would be. A lot of it will come over by ship, will come over by sea, or occasionally they maybe do it by air. And everything's bottled in Scotland. So everything has to be bottled in Scotland, and then it will go into one of the ports here in Canada and then get distributed elsewhere.
and you have distribution all over the world, don't you? Is there any countries you're not in, or
You know what? I'm not sure if there's any that's not in. You know
no?
what?
No, I'm sure there's like some that are very specific about not having any alcohol, but it seems that because Glenmorangie and Ardbeg are such big brands, I think they're pretty much available in most places.
Well, so Glenmorangie actually was recognised as kind of being like one of the first that actually started to export to different parts of the world. And I think this is it's one of the reasons why I think we've been successful in certain regions is that we ourselves have had this base for a long, long time, like absolute decades of being able to we're exporting to those countries and maybe reaching out to those countries. So I would hazard a guess and say there's probably not many that you won't see a Glenmorangie and Ardbeg in. But
Yeah,
Ardbeg's a bit different. Ardbeg isn't the biggest distillery. You know, we make just over 1 million litres a year, and Glenmorangie is like 6 million litres a year, which seems monumental. I understand when you're talking millions of pure spirit, it does seem monumental. But with the demand for both Glenmorangie and Ardbeg, it's not as much as what we'd we'd love to have bigger distribution. I guess like that's kind of the dream, but we also need to manage our stock, and that's the most important thing, really.
yeah, of course. No, there certainly are two brands that a lot of people love, which is great to hear because I know there's a lot of people that connect over their love for the brands as well. I think that was the most of the questions I had. I just wanted to check if there was anything you wanted to like showcase or lift up, or any fun facts or anything.
Well, I think one thing I want to say is that thank you for having me on. Like this is great.
Yeah,
Um,
of course. No, it's been great. I wish we could just continue to talk, but I'm a little bit scared that the Zoom's going to shut down because of the time limits.
no, I want to say like though for the feedback that I've heard in the UK between the BBC and Taylor Craig's been great. So thanks very much for everyone who's been sharing their thoughts on it. But yeah, we're really hoping that we've got really exciting stuff coming up next year for Ardbeg. We've got our Ardbeg day releases next year coming out. We'll probably hear about that at the start of next year, maybe going into like around the April time. That's going to be super exciting as well. But apart from that, I'm just really looking forward to having a dram with you when I finally get back over to Scotland.
Yeah, let's hope it's soon. And where can people find you if they're interested in hearing more about you, or maybe they live in Canada and they're curious to learn more about the brands?
Yeah, so all of our Instagram pages are fantastic. You can go on at Glenmorangie or at Ardbeg. If you want to reach out to myself, it's at Whiskey Bry, whiskey without an E because I know how to spell BRY. And it's if you want to reach out to me about any sort of Scotch whiskey stuff, that's absolutely fine. If you're looking for any questions about Canada, not just Canadian whiskey, but even just like recommendations on where to go to when you come to Canada, feel free to do that as well. Um, Also, as well, I will give a shout out to our US team. So Glenmorangie and Ardbeg also have their own individual Instagram accounts for America. Um, we have David Blackmore, my friend Cameron George, and Dan Crowell, who are brand ambassadors there. And the three of them have been making it absolute brilliant content as well. So I do recommend checking them out as well.
Oh, that's brilliant. And of course, if you're based here in the UK, then check out the Hip Flask Hiking Club. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
they
of
have
course.
actually, on one of the last tastings that I was at, they kind of inspired me to check out maybe to go climb a Munro soon. Do you have any recommendations for which one I should start with?
Yeah, yeah. It's one thing I was talking about the things that I miss in Scotland, and I guess there's a lot of it. They made me homesick if I said everything, but certainly going hiking is something that Scotland is 100% one of the best places to go to. The first Munro that I ever did was the Buchel Etive Moor in Glencoe. Actually, as well, funnily enough, it was the first time I tried Ardbeg as well. So the first time I done a Munro is the first time I tried Ardbeg 10. But no, I'd probably say if you've got it in you, I think myself, if I said to myself now I would be able to do it, I wouldn't be too sure. But yeah, the Buckle Edinburgh and Glencoe, I think just go for it. It's one of the most beautiful hills and a great hike.
Also sounds like one of the ones that are very easy to spell.
I know. You always have to second guess yourself when it comes to these hills.
Well, I've stolen so much of your time. I know I said it would be under 30 minutes. I'm terribly sorry, but it's been so interesting talking to you, Bryan.
No. This has been an absolute pleasure and a great honor. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
So yeah, there we go. That's my little interview with Bryan, and as you can tell, there was just so many things to chat about, and I wish we could have just kept going, but I kind of had to keep it to a reasonable length at least. I hope you liked it, and if you did, please let me know what you liked, if there's any guests you would like to see in the future, if there's anything you're curious about. And of course, a massive thank you to my wonderful supporters on Patreon for submitting questions. It was really helpful. And of course, I hope you got all your questions answered. But I hope you all had an absolutely wonderful day. Sláinte Skål.